Well, good evening and welcome to the Gold Coats and Guns Hour here on YouTube. We're going to be on here for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll move over to my Odyssey channel, and where I'll do the full live stream. We're going to talk for about 15 minutes, and then we'll move over from there. If you guys are interested, you can follow my work over at my blog at tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. Links to this are all down below in the description, so, have at, do what you want. I don't really care. It's funny, the minute I really stopped caring about this YouTube channel at all, now I've got 7,500 people following me on YouTube. It's hilarious. I finally break out of, the Google algorithm jail, and now I don't give a shit. Hilarious. I don't really care. So I hope everybody's well. Again, like I said, we always do about 15 minutes here first, and then we move over to Odyssey, where we really let our metaphorical hair down, because I can't let any hair down. And the link to that is in the chat, again, right there. All right, so what are we talking about tonight? Well, to me, this war in Ukraine is very interesting, and it's fascinating. It's endlessly fascinating. We just put out the latest issue of the Gold Goats and Guns newsletter, which you can get through Patreon. And we spent a lot of time, Dexter White and I spent a lot of time trying to get a handle on what we think is happening on the ground and in the kind of geopolitical ether space and all of this stuff. And I kept, during all of our discussions about this, and he and I went back and forth about this a lot, because that's what we do. It's like, just show up once a month and write a newsletter. We literally talk about this stuff all day. I kept trying to bring it out of the military realm, and I kept saying there's another layer to this war that's really, really important. And to me, that layer of the war is, of course, the financial war, which is really the big war that's been going on. I mean, I've been saying for forever that I think that World War III started in 2014 with the overthrow of Viktor Yanukovych and the readmission of Crimea back into reunification of Crimea with Russia, and the civil war in the Donbass, and dogs and cats living together, and then Russia incurs into supports the Syrian army in Syria, and blah 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 blah. And it's just been one sanctions war, financial war, intelligence war, proxy wars, all over the world for 8 years now. And it's like, now we have a normie war. So now the big question I have to everybody is there a Federal Reserve component to this, right? And I've been asking this question since June of last year and saying, look, why would the Fed raise the payout rate on reverse repos by 5 basis points and, begin the process of really tightening global liquidity of dollars overseas if they weren't interested in, reasserting themselves as, the primary arbiters of monetary policy and the primary, and put this political dick on the table, for lack of a better term, right? I'm putting Powell, putting his balls on the table saying, look, we're not down with another $15 trillion worth of spending like we did during COVID or whatever the hell it was. We're not doing it. And Martin Armstrong makes the point all the time in defense of the Federal Reserve. And, as an Austrian and a libertarian, I find central banks completely anathema to human decency. But Marty kept making the point that the Fed always gets the blame, and it's unfair. Now, and I, for years, resisted this argument for a lot of reasons, Like, well, if the Fed, wasn't complicit in all this stuff, why did they keep going along with it? The truth of the matter is that when you factor in that perspective with Jeff Snyder's perspective about the Eurodollar markets really setting monetary policy, because European banks can create more dollars than the Federal Reserve can, then the Eurodollar markets are really the arbiter of whether or not we're going to have monetary expansion or not. And whenever the Fed tries to pull back on liquidity, the Eurodollar markets blow up, and then the Fed has to respond to that, and then that's where we are. So now the question I have, and I've been having for a long time, and I've been asking somebody to challenge me on this, is the Fed trying to force a new reality onto the U.S. political scene. And Armstrong makes the point that the Fed takes the blame, but it's really Congress that sets the spending, and then the Fed is stuck, right, between, you know, I'm going to invoke Sting here, right, between the Scylla of Congress wanting to spend its way spend us into debtor's prison, and the Charybdis of the Eurodollar markets demanding it, for a lack of a better term. What's the Fed to do? They can't shit or go blind, right? So is all the opprobrium that we've thrown at the Fed, us Ron Paul style Austrians and other, not even Ron Paul style Austrians, but even hardcore Austrians and libertarians and conservatives that we've thrown, Ron has rightly popularized the problems at the Federal Reserve, but in doing so, also oversimplified the analysis for political purposes, because you can't do complicated messaging in this world. And the Fed is a great bit of marketing, right? You can't go, and the Fed, because the Eurodollar markets really set monetary policy. That's not nearly as sexy. So, I understand it. And part of the problem here is one of perception of how to explain the nuances of what the situation actually is. So when I see the Fed after last week's rate hike, and, the typical naysayers are like, oh, well, 25 basis points means nothing when, inflation's running 9%, and they're still woefully behind the curve. Like, and all these fucking people who are supposed to be like freaking Austrians are now all of a sudden proto-Keynesians because, God forbid, the Fed makes a policy error. Like, the fuck? That's like the whole purpose. That's like Austrian economics is one big fucking policy error from a Keynesian perspective. Like, it's obvious, or an econometrics perspective. It's like, that's the point. Like, it's not a feature. That's not a bug. That's a feature. So, regardless of Peter Schiff, and even to a lesser extent, zero hedge. It's like, it's really frustrating to listen to this go on, right? So, the situation here is that the Fed comes out last week, raises interest rates. The market is like, okay, wow, that was more than we were expecting. And what did we see happen? Rates rose rapidly. Interest rates on sovereign debt around the world rose rapidly. The Fed bumped up RRP payouts to continue to keep it 5 basis points above their target rate, 30 basis points. Makes perfect sense. But then they came out and said that we're raising at least 25 basis points, or that we're going to raise 25 basis points at every meeting for the rest of the year, which means 1.75% at the end of the year. Now, I don't give a fuck what anybody was thinking, whatever anybody says, other than hardcore assholes like myself who subscribe to my thesis that the Fed is actively attempting to destroy the European Central Bank. Believed that the Fed would raise rates 7 times this year, or even announce it. Maybe 2 or 3, then they'll give back 1, or they'll try and raise up to about a point, and then everything will start to go haywire, and the budget will blow out, and they'll get scared, and they'll run back into their hole, and there'll be another 6 years worth of QE. I'm like, I'm sorry, y'all. You're reading this thing really, really wrong. Y'all, my homies, you're all reading this shit wrong. I'm like, it's very obvious what I see what's going on here. And, big baller Powell is going, we're going to fuck Congress in the ass. The weakness to this argument has been, how does the Fed pull it off? If the Fed was going to do this now and why not 10 years ago or 15 years ago? Well, there's a couple of reasons for this. The first is, up until Powell, they were all ivory tower intellectuals out of Harvard and Yale and everywhere else, where they were literally born and bred to become central bankers, to do what the globalists, the technocratic globalists want you to do, the Davos crowd to do. Second thing, they were in control of, they were ideologically on board with the destruction and the undermining of the United States and the power of the Federal Reserve, in order to transfer as much power to other jurisdictions in real terms, i.e. to City of London and Frankfurt and the rest of the European markets. Hong Kong, other areas where dollars are created out of thin air because there's so many dollars out there. So now the bigger question is the Fed for real? And I think they are. Look at what we've seen in the last 48, 72 hours. And I'm not even going to talk about everything that I think is going on in my head right now. We may talk about this a little bit when we get over to Odyssey. Remember, about 4 minutes, I'm going to be done here. But this is what I want to leave you with the next couple of minutes that I've got left. Over the weekend, we saw, and into this week, we've seen just about every major Davos-style talking point about how they're going to and implement the Great Reset come out of Joe Biden's fucking mouth. New World Order, that we have to lead. We have to lead in Ukraine because we have to support Ukraine for these reasons. Russia's going to do a massive cyber attack, their cyber Polygon event, chemical weapons, assassinating political leaders. Like, it's all on the table. Like, and they've done this many times in the past where they picked a fight with the Russians and then tell you, oh, well, we're going to do a false flag and blame the Russians for it. Shoot down the Su-25 over Idlib in late 2015, shooting down MH17 during the war for the Donbass back in 2014, Skripal, Litvinenko, you name it, all of it. It's all typical shit. And the Brits have been out there at the vanguard of this. And the Russians, by the way, if you haven't noticed, have been out in front of every one of these potential quote unquote false flags, saying, oh, by the way, we have men surrounding this ammonia facility in some Ukrainian city because we have it on credible intelligence that they were going to blow it up and try and kill a bunch of people. Now, it doesn't matter if that's bullshit or it's not. What it does do is it says, yeah, we're not going to do a chemical weapons attack. We're actually trying to stop one. So, and then you notice that doesn't happen again. Because, these chemical weapons attacks are almost always done, they're almost all false flags. And because there's no, chlorine gas that, Assad was supposed to use and all this shit. So when you look at what's going on, so you have all of that at the same time, 3 times this week, already it's only fucking Tuesday, the Fed has come out with a more hawkish statement than they came out with at last week's fucking meeting. We might have to hike more than this, Powell, more than 25 basis points at the next meeting. We may have to, even Bostic, who's one of the Atlanta Fed was even we may have to raise rates into 2023. I thought 7 would be enough, and then we'd have to cut in 2023. But I'm thinking now we might not have to, and we definitely need to run the balance sheet off faster than what I thought we were. If the petrodollar is dying by a death of 1,000 cuts, and now those cuts are getting deeper, and we're actually starting to hit major organs, it means that the flow of dollars around the world is going to start reversing, and we're not going to be able to export inflation like we have in the past. And if we can't export inflation like we have in the past, what's going to happen to all those dollars that are sitting overseas in bank accounts and under mattresses that people have been stuffing themselves full of because they're afraid of a fucking financial meltdown for the last 13 years? They're all going to start flowing. And they're going to have to be sopped up. And the only way to sop up that liquidity at this point, foreign liquidity, you guessed it, the Fed to start raising interest rates and or really start accepting even more onto their balance sheet in the form of reverse repos, and giving out collateral and taking on dollars, right? So this is where we are, right? So I want you to really think about this. It's very, very clear to me at this point in time. There's more going on here than even I'm talking about, okay? Now I'm going to get to that when I get over to Odyssey. And these ideas are really, really raw. I'm just putting them together in the last 12 to 14 hours. I haven't even had a chance to really even write them up, talk about them and whatnot. But I think I'm going to talk about some of them tonight. So we're going to move over to Odyssey. Here's the link in the chat. Follow me over there. We got 200. Wow, we have 200 people over here on YouTube. But we're going to break. Well, if we have 200 people here on YouTube, we're going to break 400 on Odyssey tonight. Wouldn't that be cool? So we'll meet you all over there in a little bit. But I want you to think about this. I think the Fed has entered the war in a significant way. And it means it's putting a countdown timer on the neocons' argument that they need to turn Ukraine into a fucking quagmire for the Russians. Because that means that the Fed is upping the financial pain on a lot of the world, while Davos is trying to put the screws to the rest of the world and burn everything down. But the race now is between the Russians establishing facts on the ground in Ukraine versus a financial meltdown in Europe. And that's been my thesis for a while, and I'm seeing it play out almost in real time. You guys take care. You be well. We'll talk soon. We'll talk on Odyssey in about 5 minutes.